Hey YouTube, how's it going? It's about midnight um, on a Saturday. Anyway, um, it's my first time posting a video kind of like this. We'll probably need some editing. I have a lot of gaps in my speech, and sometimes I don't really um, get straight to the point. I guess I have kind of a loopy thought pattern. There's a lot of things I'd like to talk about, but one thing I was just thinking about tonight is just cosmic unknowing, the unknown, and just how that relates to basic unsatisfactoriness kind of with life. Because if you think about it, there's just so much that we don't know, from moment to moment, day to day. There's just what we know is so much less than what we do know, and it really trips me out when I meet people that just think they know it all. uh, I think I saw a quote. It was like true knowledge is like, and that you know nothing. But I mean, really, just think about it. I was standing in the bathroom taking a piss, and I'm just like, man, my blood pressure could drop right now, and I could just bang my head against the toilet bowl here and be done. And like, what would be of this, then? Um, there's just so much that could happen, both good and bad, and it's all uncertain up until the point that it happens. So I don't know. For some people, there's a lot of spontaneity in that, so they would really kind of contest that that's actually something negative. But for me, I'm not too fond of surprises a lot of the times. I mean, some surprises are very nice and others aren't. But it's just crazy, if you really think about where you're at right now. You're this multicellular, vertebrate organism on this very tiny rock, just floating around in a circle in deep space. And there are 8 billion or 7 billion or however many there are of these other multicellular organisms that are kind of almost on your wavelength running around on this planet, consuming resources and whatnot. But I mean, even in the perspective of 7 billion, that makes you about the size of a single bacteria, on a colony inside of a toilet bowl or something like that. It's we're very minute, and a lot of people have this really kind of exaggerated sense of the importance of their own being, when in fact there is none. And a lot of people kind of seek out that importance, whether it's imparted on them by a group or organization, or in their belief in a god, or, gods, or some kind of belief system. You know, a lot of people out there actively doing things to just kind of suppress that realization that we're all essentially nothing. I mean, we're minute. If you really take a larger kind of perspective on what you are, I mean, bacteria is kind of an exaggeration on a universal scale, because our planet isn't even the size of a bacteria on a toilet bowl inside of a house. I mean, it's just tiny, really small. And there are so many different factors, that have all these different variables that kind of, influence us being alive. And if any one little thing just kind of gets out of whack, the whole kit and caboodle can be over just like that in a split second, just done. And I think that frightens a lot of people. A lot of people are afraid of the unknown. A lot of people fear what will happen after death, and maybe rightfully so. Who's to say there's not a reason to be scared, or there is? Ultimately, no one's ever returned from death. You know, at least scientifically verified. Maybe anecdotally, people have, but I mean, I find a lot of those claims to be spurious. Um, so it's a great unknown. The only thing that's certain is the present moment. And I mean, that's about all we've got. But it's just really interesting. I think everybody has this basic underlying anxiety because ultimately they know that they're nothing, that there's nothing, they're not important. You can ascribe all this importance to one thing or another, but really we're just floating around on this little rock out in the middle of nowhere. And I don't want to downplay, the preciousness and just kind of, beauty, or, and I don't even want to say beauty because most of life's very ugly. I've seen a lot of ugly things in life. But I don't want to downplay, I don't want anybody watching this to go and be like, oh, there's no meaning, and like, oh, we're not important and we're just bacteria, so I'm going to go sterilize the planet. I'm not trying to say that. What I'm trying to say is don't take yourself so seriously. It's just, it's probably the best piece of advice that I've ever gotten in my life is just always be able to laugh at yourself, because really this thing's just kind of like one big joke. I don't want to say life's a joke either, because it can get very serious at times, and and whatnot. And there are a lot of very serious and pressing issues, but really it's just, I don't know. I just think there are these people with these inflated egos that are built up as a defense against this just cosmic awareness of your own insignificance in the grand scale of things. I mean, you're an assembly of all these atoms that have been around for billions and trillions of years, and who knows how many cycles of reconfigurations the exact molecules in your body have undergone. I mean, the water molecules that you drank in your fridge could have been from your great 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 grandpa peeing into a stream 10 million years ago, and it's the same ones. They've just transformed into something else. And everything about life is transitory in nature. Everything's transient. Everything's changing. And whatever you try to grasp onto, if you have any expectations that it's going to remain there longer than the moment, those expectations you have are not grounded in reality, because it's just, you can make a very, 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 very good prediction that something will be the way it is in the future, but ultimately it's just that the future might not even be there for you. And we're very powerful as a species, because currently on this planet we're the only known species to recognize our own existence. And I think that self-awareness is what makes us distinct from other organisms. Not to say that they're any less worthy to life, liberty and pursuit of the happiness as any sentient being is, but that's what makes us different. And there's a very specific terror that's involved with recognition of oneself as alive and being subject to birth and death that a lot of organisms, I don't think, undergo. And in that way, I think that much of the time the suffering of human beings is greater than the suffering of animals, even animals in very horrible situations, because they don't have the memory, the length of memory And the same connections we do is to process an event and to kind of torture themselves with it, you know, before the event happens or afterwards, i.e., you know, anxiety, guilt, worry, distress, like that. I think they feel immediate fear like we do, and they definitely feel pain, but I don't think that they process those deeper, a lot of animals, and I'm not saying all animals, but, you know, primarily I'm thinking of it like insects and some birds, you know, chickens when I'm talking about this, that they don't really seem to have that kind of like guilt, worry, anxiety, and fear. And honestly, I could be completely baseless in this claim because I haven't observed a lot of chicken behavior directly, and I respect their right to life, you know. But I just don't think it's the same because I've seen movies of these cattle slaughterhouses, and while one cattle is getting slaughtered, sometimes, you know, the other animals don't appear to be displaying a reaction. And maybe that's because they're, you know, just paralyzed in fear. And I mean, that's very probable. I think one of the three responses to danger, you know, it's like fight, flight, or freeze, and they could be in the freezing point there, but I don't know. And that's one thing I will admit to you that I don't know. Everything that's presented to you on the internet, regardless of claims to factual accuracy, is all based on something that's completely subject to change. And there's no definitive authority in science, which is the, you know, the study of reality as it is, according to most. That, I mean, they're experts in certain fields, but any claim a scientist makes can be challenged. And any claims they make are subject to change. You know, even very concrete ones like, you know, gravity is 9.8 meters per second down squared down. That's true on this planet. It will probably be true on this planet for a very long period of time. But I mean, at any given moment, it could change. And making that statement, and having belief that it is 9.8 meters per squared per second down, um, it's very, very logical to assume it will be that way for hundreds, if not thousands of years. But at the very moment that you make that claim, it could change. And so that puts you in the realm of not 100% certainty on that. That's more like 99.9 repeating out like almost infinitely percent certainty that within the next 5 seconds, gravity will be 9.8 meters per second squared down. But in no way, shape, or form is it absolutely certain. It's very close to being certain, but it's not. And over time, it will change. And that's the same thing with anything. And we just don't know. You know, uncertainty is at the core of being with whatever you are, whether you're human, animal, machine, or anything. Uncertainty is the foundation of our existence. And it's obvious, it's apparent everywhere. You know, if you just look at any household object 50 years ago, the atoms in that object were more than likely something else. You know, if it's older than 50 years old, you know, and I'm talking about like household objects, not parents or, you know, um, different type stuff within the house or whatnot. But, you know, just like a TV remote here, it's like, you just think about it, it's plastic, you know, it's kind of hard, and then there's like soft plastics, and obviously there's some paint in there. There's a little bit of gloss on that button. You know, there's a lot of components on the inside, silicone, you know, that's been treated with certain chemicals to make it more conductive, and it's got like the circuits on there with like that are gold plated. Not sure what kind of metal they use for the actual. Could just be all gold, but I don't think so. I know they're like micro etched. That'd be interesting to look up. But what I'm trying to say is like that. That remote hasn't always been a remote, and nor will it always be a remote. And just like that, you know, the being that you are now, what is yourself? You know, what is the self? I always hear people saying, "Oh, I've got to go find myself," you know. And I'm like, was there really a self defined to begin with? What is your self? Is it your mind? Is it your body? Is it a combination of the mind and body? You know, is it what you do? Because that's something completely separate than, you know, your mind and your body. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, I'm a soldier." Okay, well, what is a soldier? A soldier, you know, prepares for war and fights in war. It's technically the words one who has pay. Um, okay, so you're fighting war and you're preparing for war. Yes. Okay. You know, or, you know, I'm a farmer. Well, what's a farmer? I grow plants. Like, oh, okay. So, I mean, it's just what is the self? That's how a lot of people identify is through what they do. And what they do isn't just their mind and body, it's an aggregate of like a lot of circumstances that came together at the same time to require that action. It's a requirement, it's a stress that's been demanded of them, you know, to do that. Even if they've chosen to do that, it's more or less something that was asked, you know. You can like kind of give it this illusion of choice there, but more or less if you're doing something, it's because there's a demand for it, you know, whether you're creating the demand or someone else is. And there are exceptions to this, you know, artists I think are kind of almost an exception because the only demands that they have are kind of self-imposed, and there are a lot of people that kind of operate and have these professions based off of, you know, the demands that are self-created and self-imposed, and that isn't necessarily, you know, superior to, excuse me, to any other profession where it's the demands are more external. I'm not trying to make that judgment. I'm just saying that, you know, there's a difference there. But back to the initial question, you know, what is the self? Is it your mind? Is it your body? Is it what you do? You know? But I firmly believe, and when I say I believe, it is a belief for me at this point because in my spiritual development, I haven't really, I don't think I've actually realized this in the way that, you know, is kind of prescribed, I guess you could say. But I really do believe that there is no such thing as the self. I think it's more or less a created notion, you know, just for comfort and convenience and to fight that cosmic insecurity that's kind of universal to us all, that's just created by not knowing, you know. And I think that's what the self is. It's more or less a mental construct, and it's really hard for people to define it in any one way. Um, and I think it would be better. And a lot of times, it's defined very obtusely. You know, people vacillate between, you know, different uses of the word self. You know, like what are you going to do with yourself when you get older? Ah, you know, well, do you mean what am I going to do with my mind? What I'm going to do with my body? What I'm going to do with my body and mind? What I'm going to do with the profession that I'm in? You know, what do you mean specifically by that? You know, because there's a great deal of difference, you know, in in the answers to that question, based off the definition of self alone, and most people can't give you a solid, concrete definition of self. You know, can't pin it down to any one thing. There's a lot of flexibility there, but really, if you think about it, and I know there's a lot of physics types that are probably going to chew me up if they see this video, and that's cool. I'd like to learn from you. I'm not really that deep into physics or hard sciences. I'm just getting back into school. But from a more philosophical perspective, I mean, where is the disjunction between anything? Even out in deep space, there's a gap, but what's on the exterior of the barriers to that gap, isn't that connected at some other point? And if not, isn't that gap shifting in such a way that it's still a part of the whole? And I don't think that's a very good question. I don't know if I'm explaining that right. But within the earth, say like in the microcosm of this room I'm in, where do I end and the couch, where does the couch begin? You know? That's why it seems pretty obvious to a lot of you, but to me it's not. I feel like I'm a part of the couch. And I don't think the couch has feelings, but um, yeah, I'm getting a little lost here, as you probably are as well. What I'm trying to say is that yes, there's obviously a difference between a human leg and a couch, and that's where we draw the difference between the couch and the leg is in your mind. But does that really exist outside your mind? Or is this room really one solid form to where everything's kind of interdependent inside the room, including the phone I'm recording this video on? Because it's technically making contact with the air molecules that are around it. And that's making contact with the ceiling. It's coming out of the ductwork, and, that goes outside. And then there's a television on, and there's all these different things, these different objects in the room. And are they really separate? Or is that just some kind of perceived notion? I mean, there are obviously differences between the different items that are here, including, and I'm not going to call myself an item. I don't want to lend, the mental habit of dehumanization to, I don't want anybody to kind of perpetuate that, but I'm here on the couch as well in this room, but I feel like I'm a part of the room, you know, and a part of the couch. And I don't use any intoxicating substances anymore. So that's just kind of how I see things. Is that yes, there's obviously a difference between a television, a phone, a couch, and a leg, but within the construct of this room, they're all connected. There's no vacuum in the room to where there's actually separation. And even if the vacuum, okay, here's what I was getting at earlier, and this is more philosophical than physics, but even if the vacuum exists, it's still connected to the two separate places at some point. So they're still kind of connected, even though it's separated by vacuum. The vacuum being absolute nothingness, sheer void. So that's kind of my reflection on that. And if you think about it, who you are, your body, the way your body is, the way your mind is, it's nature and nurture. Can't really be pinned down to one thing. And I don't know. It's a bunch of causes and effects that have just kind of come together. It's not so much you know, as it is a whole bunch of things that have happened for billions of years before we've been here. You know, that if those things didn't happen in the correct sequence or how they did, you know, it would be a totally different outcome. I mean, even little minutia, if that changed, it would be totally different. And you may or may not be here, you know, what you consider yourself. So, anyway, have a good night, and I hope you have enjoyed the video and learned something from it. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to respond below or send me a message. Peace.